Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. And today we got a conversation about podcasts on my podcast for you who is listening to a podcast. I'm just very excited for this conversation. My guest is already over my nonsense and she'll check out of here very quickly, I'm sure. But no, I have an amazing guest to talk about how podcasting cures your networking troubles. And we'll also talk a little bit about how to get on podcasts and be a little bit more efficient if you are someone who likes to go and be a guest on other podcasts. So definitely tune in. A lot of gold here. And I have the owner of Mic'd Up Booking, Nicole Grinnell. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. No, I think both you and I could nerd out on podcasts and all things with that. So I'm excited to be here.
We definitely could. I love podcasting. All the things we're going to talk about today, I believe in. And fun fact, just a little disclaimer, Nicole's company has placed a number of guests on my show at this point. I've lost count. So I know they do phenomenal work and she's got A+ tips for you. So Nicole, thank you for that first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that's been successful. And from knowing you even the short minutes, I know that our guests had a good experience with you. So we appreciate that all because hosts are equally as important to our guest experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's dive in though, because one of the things that I've said publicly on this show, I've said as a guest when I'm on other people's shows is that the greatest benefit, I don't want to say that, one of the greatest benefits of podcasting, both guesting and hosting, is the networking benefits. Yeah. And that's kind of what we want to lead off here with today. So give me your take on the networking side of podcasts, both guesting and hosting.
Yeah, I think podcasting is like this unkept secret that people are starting to discover in using that as networking. And I will tell you from the business owner standpoint, we struggle with finding really great networking opportunities. We also need to get our message out. We need to have social media and marketing. And so podcasting, really the way that we view it is that one-stop shop. So in being very dedicated, and which is what we do at Mic'd Up, of who we get our guests in front of and making sure that that's a fruitful audience and host introduction, and then the content that comes from there, it really became just this no-brainer. Like, I mean, why would you not take, our show's going to be 15 minutes, right? So 30 minutes out of my week is going to build a relationship with you, have my message out there to listeners, create great content, and for a price and a time efficiency that all business owners can absorb. And that really was our goal.
Yeah, I mean, what did I charge you to be on this show? It was like $50,000 or something. Like,
it
was
yeah. I mean, I think right? We mortgaged the house. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no.
So that's my point. Is like, all you're really trying to get into is that relationship, and what marketing companies are hiring and their packages is so exorbitant. Most business owners don't even go down that route. So then they're kind of left with nothing. And so we saw the podcast community as a way to really bind all of those.
Yeah, outside of the marketing and SEO aspect of the podcasting, like there's so many other benefits we could unpack, but I'm curious to continue diving deeper on this one because what I see is, both sides, and I see both sides as a host and a guest. I see the people that come on as guests and they're like all business, they're in, they're out, they're just spreading their message. And to me, they kind of miss the opportunity of the networking, of the connection. We have the time booked on the calendar. Why not use it? Right. But then I also see the people who are really, really good at networking and they make an effort to make that connection, to then go a step further and make an introduction to somebody else who could help me or the other host, whoever's there. And you want to reciprocate that, right? Like you want to continue that relationship because they're a good person. So, I mean, do you have any tips or best practices as far as what do you do? What should you do when you are a guest going on someone else's show?
Yeah. So even in what we do, we coach our clients on that. We actually call it green room ROI. So we've had clients come, they're like, I did a podcast, nothing came of it. And we're like, I don't think you did it right. So when that recording goes off, you now have a chance to connect with that host. So, hey, Brandon, you got to hear my message now. Is there anyone in your community that you think could use my service my widget, whatever. And likewise, let me learn about you. What do you do? What got you into this? Because most hosts are in a space that they are wanting to connect, they're wanting to give back. Whether it's out of curiosity, whether it's where they are in their business, but they want to do that. That's why they're in the business of podcasting. So capitalize on that as a guest, right? Who can I send you? Who could you send me? And then also, like, let's keep nurturing that relationship. So a lot of what we do with our clients is coaching them on check back in with your guests, or I'm sorry, your host that you've been on every 30 days. How's it going? Any new guests that you've had on that you think might be a good fit for each other? Or I listened to this show and I heard Bob's message and I really think that he would be a good introduction for me. Would you be open to doing that? So I've built a relationship with you being on your show. And so it's very natural to go in and be having those conversations. So that's where that networking piece is so key. And I can tell you from my own experience with multiple companies that is really what has drove most of our referral partnerships, most of our pipelines, is building those relationships.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about this too because tonight, as we're speaking, I'm gonna go to a networking event in person. First one I've been to in a long time, and here's why. This is to me is interesting, and it's centered on this conversation. Last networking event I went to, it was in New York City. I had to travel to get there. New York City is expensive for any of you who don't know that. Really hard to get to. It was a room of, I don't know, it was somewhere between 50 and 75 people. Not really my ideal room. And pretty much nothing came of it. A couple relationships here and there, a couple second conversations just turned out, it is what it is. Didn't work out. Then I had to travel back. Also expensive, not fun. And it was like a day and a half of travel and all that fun stuff and expenses. I can have on a normal Tuesday when I bulk record these shows, I can have up to 12 conversations with people in my house. There's no expense. All I have is the expense of endless coffee.
Right.
And it's just, I can meet 12 amazing people that I handpick from the internet who I want to talk to. Nicole, why should I ever go to another in-person networking event?
I'm going to be honest. I haven't gone out in person in probably a year and a half, truly, because exactly what you were talking about. You go into a room, and let's be honest, most networking events are going to have somewhat of the same demographic there, especially if you're doing like local ones. You're going to get, we all know the industries that show up for everyone, right? And so that's not going to always lead to those great relationships. So yeah, exactly. My team, I will go to my podcast booking agent and say, hey, I'm really focused right now. Like for us in our staffing business, we're really doing a lot in construction. I need to get on construction podcasts. So I'm getting to like tell my podcast agent, put me in front of people in construction. And not only that, like, let's use the angle of like, I am a woman servicing construction, and there are a whole other gamut of networking events of women in construction, right? So let me talk to those things. So you get to like literally build your audience of exactly where you are wanting to focus on, and then go in and tell your message and build those relationships. So it's been so much more fruitful than anything we've done, even a trade show. A lot of people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars on a trade show to collect business cards. And there's benefit to that. I'm certainly not knocking it. We're getting ready to go down to a construction one, and there's some relationships that can be built there. But the reality is there may be a lot of looky-loos. There's people that aren't decision makers. You're going to get a lot of people that are just there for the swag, want to come for the booth. And so when you get into these curated relationships through podcasts, you're kind of cutting through all of that. You've got to build a relationship organically, and just doing that natural follow-up and building those relationships is what yields that result.
Yeah, it's such a compelling argument. The other side of that argument is it for everybody? Like if someone approaches you, they come to Mic'd Up Booking and they're like, hey, I want to use your service. I want to be a podcast guest. Are there types of people you say no to, like as far as the industry, the job title, whatever? Or can it be used for everybody if you're smart about it?
So the only people I would tell you that we say no to, quote unquote, are people that really don't get what podcasting does and are very kind of closed-minded. So I'll give you an example. My other company's in staffing. So if I was a guest with kind of a closed-minded opportunity, I'd be like, no, I do staffing, put me on HR podcast. That's it. Well, really the goal of this is to build that network. So some of my most fruitful relationships were on giving back. entrepreneurs that built giving back into their, had nothing to do with staffing. I don't even know that we talked about it. But in that relationship that I built with the host, he was like, I know there are people that are really like-minded in giving back. I have some introductions I wanted to introduce you to. Those have been six-figure introductions, truly. So if someone goes, no, what I want is to build a community. I want to be introduced to people that are like-minded, whether that's my culture, whether it's my services, whether it's direct customers of listeners. And I want to start getting out the message of my who and why and what we do. That is a really good relationship, regardless of industry. That's going to make for a successful guest. People that are like, no, this is my industry, only put me in this box. Well, guess what? Everybody can throw a rock and know a staffing agency. I don't want to be on HR Contest. I want to be on, where are business owners living? What are they struggling with? Let me talk to them directly and build relationships there. So if you come in open-minded, trust the process, because that's what our agents are there to do, is to really guide that. It's a very successful relationship.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. Because it's noise, right? And that's honestly why I created this podcast, because I used to be a podcast junkie, and I would listen to pretty much only business podcasts because I like business. But then I felt like something was lacking, right? Because you can't just focus all in on business and have a successful business, as counterintuitive as that seems. So we bring episodes of mindset, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, and we try to build the full entrepreneur on this show so that the listener gets those different mindsets, those different opinions. But if you're in business like myself, we run a fractional COO consulting firm. If I only go on business shows, I am just noise, right? Like, it's valuable for sure to build my brand, build my authority.
Right.
But same as you, like, anybody could hire a COO off LinkedIn. It doesn't differentiate you. So when you are opening your mind up to the different shows, how do you figure out, you gave the giving example. What are some ways people can ask themselves questions to say, where should I be? Like, where is my ideal client going to be listening?
Yeah. So I think, really figuring out like what your why is, right? What your culture is, who you are, what your background is. I can't tell you how many people will say, I loved hearing about that you grew up in a small business, because I grew up in a small business, and I know, like, we just think and work differently, like having that background. And that's why I want to work with you. So, tapping into those people that are going to have those connections with you, because that makes for a well-aligned client. Those make for well-aligned relationships. So if you know that this candidate or this client profile does not work well with you, let's not go attract those, right? If you know, like, oh, that's only going to attract people that are going to fight their bills, they're going to have problems, or what, let's not go there. So let's start aligning you with who that is. So that's part of what we do, is really talk about who are the clients you're wanting to identify, what are open pipelines that you see, and then what are opportunities that, like, when you were just dreaming, that you are thinking, I think we would be really good served in this community. Well, let's start getting into that community, and let's talk about why you think that you serve that community really well. So just kind of, and that's part of what we do in our process, is walking our clients through all of that and giving them space to think about it, to not just be like I said, I'm staffing, I'm HR. No, let's talk more about you. Let's talk about your team. That's another thing we're starting to see, is, are there other people on your team that would be good to feature, right? So if we've got somebody that, like, they have a really compelling story of why they came here, what they do with this business, let's also promote them in that space. So we really walk through all of that to make sure that it's a fruitful endeavor on all of our clients' part.
And that kind of begs the next question, because you identify where your clients are, what they're listening to, what shows they're going to be on, what shows you're going to resonate with. Where do you find these shows, Nicole? That seems to be the sticky point, because I'll tell you our journey just real quick. We were in a number of Facebook groups around podcasting to find guests, and where hosts can post their availability. And I noticed a common theme, we'll say, where the guests were not necessarily ready to be guests on shows, and some of the hosts weren't really ready to be hosts.
Yeah.
And we started to find different avenues to find shows, but everyone wants to say, like, oh, I want to be on Joe Rogan's show.
Yeah,
You're not going to be on
exactly.
Joe Rogan's show. Like, let's lower the bar a little bit. But where's that in between? How do you actually make this a process and make it a streamlined process so you can find the right shows, get on them, and then hopefully monetize your experience from being on the show?
So that's a great question. So we've actually been doing this for about 8 years now. And funny enough, it was through one of our staffing clients that was like, "Hey, could you get me on podcast? Like, I feel like that would be a really great way." And we were like, "Yeah, we can figure that out." So I feel like we've grown up with podcasts. So along those ways, we have just been able to develop really great relationships. So that's first and foremost. I mean, you mentioned, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of people from your show or from your company come through to my show, right? So we capitalize that on well so that oh, I love when mic'd up people are sent over to me because they're prepared. They already know how this goes. They're going to make sure to repurpose that content, all of that. So relationships first and foremost. Since then, the podcast community has gotten really heavy in technology. So we do have technology that allows us to see all the shows that are coming out, obviously search filtering to make sure that we're finding the right demographics. We have a tool that we use that actually creates like a candidate profile, or I'm sorry, a client profile. So it allows us to say, hey, this person is willing and able to be booked. Here's what they're interested in talking about. And we're able to receive those submissions as well. So it's a little bit of tech, a little bit of relationships. But we really want to just make sure that we're finding the right audience for all of our clients.
Yeah, and I will say it's one of those things. Relationships are so important because,
Mhm.
like you said, if I see an email that says whoever the name is at mic'dupbooking.com, I don't have to read the email. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds so bad, but I just reply book now. Like, I send the form link because I trust that it's going to be, they know that they've done their homework. They know what the show's about. They know the perfect guest for it.
Mhm.
And if the profile fits, it's going to be a fantastic conversation. If I remember, I'll put a link to some previous mic'd up guests down below in the description, just so you guys can, as listeners, can check out the all stars that they host, that they have as their clients. I'm curious though, for the listener, let's say they want to try to DIY this. They've never been on a podcast, or maybe they've been on a couple, but with those sporadic results. Like, what would be some things that would be, I guess, best practices for approaching a show? Not Joe Rogan. Please don't go to Joe Rogan, but
Right.
approaching a podcast that, would be beneficial for you to be on as a guest. How do you go about doing that? Is it a cold email? Like, what do you suggest there?
Yeah, so I mean, and DIY, like there's a time and place for it for sure, but it's like anything. I mean, I think the example you gave is perfect because when you're going and representing yourself, you're probably going to get either pushed to the bottom or it's going to take longer because you're kind of coming in representing yourself, right? So you as the host don't know, like, is this person going to show up professionally? Do they even know how this works? Like, is this worth my time? When you're working with an agency, that they're going to make sure that all that's done and they're going to be accountable for it. So Brandon, if you were like, guys, you sent me this guy, he didn't show up on time, he had no idea what my show was about, like the agency is really going to answer to that. So that's first and foremost, is you're going to get pushed to the front of the line. They chances are they've got more relationships. And then just the time factor. I mean, to send out hundreds and hundreds of emails on your own behalf, it's going to be a lot of research. Most times in podcasting, their contact information isn't easily listed. So it's going to be a lot of kind of digging. So it really comes down to, I say everything in life comes down to the compromise of time or budget. So when you are starting up and you don't have that budget, you're going to lean on time, right? You're going to be able to do that research, send it out on your behalf, and hope you get some great results. When you reach that stage that time now is the problem, but you have the budget, that's a great time to hand it off to an agency and just continue that momentum of what you're building in that community. But let somebody else handle the day to day and the details and the scheduling and the prep and all of that. Because both on the guesting and the host side, there's a lot of administration that goes into it.
Too much. Don't think this is
Too
easy.
much. Yeah, it really is.
That's my warning. Let me give you a curveball of a question before we wrap up here. I don't know if you have this data. I just thought of it though, because I do a lot of my own reaching out to be a guest on shows. We don't do
Mhm.
a ton of it, but I've always just done it myself. Have you ever done a study on the ROI of your clients before they started working with you and after, like, how many more podcasts they get on,
Oh.
or maybe how much more money they make from being on that volume of shows or better quality shows? I don't even know if you have that. So I just thought I'd
That's a
ask
good
you.
so I get that asked a lot, and it's kind of hard for us because we're not on necessarily the flip side of the client other than hearing like, "Hey, I booked a client from this show," or but we're not actually getting any kind of like monetary data from them, like how much did that show get you or anything, but I can speak from my own experience, right? So really what I find is that when clients are actually following our process and really capitalizing on that, the ROI is real and it's significant. So like I mentioned, that one show led to a multi six-figure relationship. It's actually why we're going to this expo, because he's now tapped me into another community. So it really is a trickle effect, because his community is now introducing me to other communities, which is introducing me to trade shows. So it becomes all of that, all from one 30-minute giving back episode that I did probably 2 years ago. Right. So we probably should put more time into like really getting those tangibles, even if I just use myself as a case study. But what I can tell you is just, it's like saying, can you tell me the ROI of your networking efforts? Right. We all know that there are hit or misses. Yeah. And we all know that there's sometimes you walk away with those golden nuggets. Right. And so it is online networking, but it's a little bit more curated because we are now literally building the audience that you want to. So you're kind of taking that 90% that maybe in person doesn't get you, and you're bringing that top 10% of the cream to go, this is actually who I need to be in front of. And this is going to yield results for me.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that answer. It all makes sense. And like I said, it's one of those things you don't think about the time and effort involved. And then when you also look at like the number of downloads that shows have, which a lot of people you may or may not have access to, you probably do, but the common guest just applying for shows, that makes a difference. Like to understand where you're going, who the audience is, how to prepare appropriately. And maybe you're getting on 5 shows a week now. And then when you join an agency like Mic'd Up, you get on one, but it's the show and they all have a result versus nothing for months.
Right.
It really starts to add up when you do it the right way. So Nicole, I really appreciate you being here and
Yeah.
breaking all this
Thanks
down.
for having me.
So I love to end these episodes with a question. So we believe at What If that powerful questions get powerful answers. And it's a question from you to the listeners though. So if someone wants to get into podcast guesting, if you want to get into hosting, don't. Just that's it. But anyway, but if you want to be a guest, all kidding aside, this is a lot of fun. But if you want to be a guest, or if they want to take their guesting to the next level, they've been doing it for a little while, they want to increase their results, what's the powerful question that they should ask themselves based on everything we talked about in this episode?
Ooh, I think that they have a really good understanding of their purpose and their why and their services. Don't go into it until you really have those defined. Because the last thing you want to do is spend the effort in that and not know those answers. Because one, that's going to dictate who you're getting in front of. And two, you want to be able to have a consistent message going out. Because also another fringe benefit of this is that people and potential clients get to hear in your own voice who you are and what you are. And we want that to be aligned. So make sure that you have those defined. And then the only other tip I would add to that is that make sure you have your digital presence in a good space before you start. So just like you don't throw an open house on the weekend that you have laundry and dishes and everything, make sure your house is in order and you are prepared to go out there and be present, because that's what podcasting yields. It yields eyes on your business and connections.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, 2 years ago, you could have done that when the housing market was crazy.
Yeah.
And I think the same is a little bit true for podcasting. Like a number of years ago, probably when you first started with that first client who asked, you probably could have just gone on podcast with whatever and actually gotten clients, but it's much more of a science and an art these days. So great questions, beautiful tips too. For those of you watching and listening, shame on me, Nicole. First of all, why didn't you call me out on this? Your website, I forgot. If you are interested in working with Mic'd Up Booking, I put it on the screen. It's mic'dupbooking.com, MICD upbooking.com. It's also down in the show notes wherever you're watching and listening. Is there anything you want people to do when they reach out? What does that look like when they do reach out to you guys?
Yeah. So honestly, the first step is we just get to know each other and get to understand what your goals are there, and just to make sure that that's aligned with what podcasting can do. So it would be great, even if you're just curious. Biggest thing I would say is most people go, I don't have anything to talk about. Who wants to hear from me? I also thought that way 8 years ago, but everyone has a story. And the reality is, if you as the business owner are not getting your message out, no one will. So you kind of have to get over yourself and we will guide you through those talking points. So just reach out to us. We'll have a discussion and see where we might be able to find a good audience for you.
I love it. This has been fantastic. For those of you watching, listening, wherever you are, please subscribe. We would love to have you back. We want to put these episodes out every single day of the week so we can help you grow your business, get on more podcasts, and build a more harmonious business and life. That's the whole goal. So subscribe. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch.